really fortunate to have a great panel to round out the day here on affordable housing. And it is a very timely topic, especially here, and throughout our region, but especially here in the city of Boulder with some things happening tonight. I'm actually going to let our panel kind of self-introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their role, their interest in affordable housing. And I think we'll start with Lou DellaCava, very well known in these parts. So, Lou.
I'm Lou DellaCava. Got here in Boulder in 1972 with the IBM Corporation, was a finance guy with them and ran their financial planning organization. About 74, they transferred me to San Jose, California, was out there for a few years and was the site controller, came back here as a product manager for IBM and around 80, and got involved in real estate development kind of as a sideline, just to own some properties and build a balance sheet. And that took off, got stuck in the 1980s, 20% interest rates. And that caused me to have to leave IBM to dedicate myself to saving my properties that had investors in it, including my parents, brother, and relatives, and IBM colleagues. I've been in real estate since. One of the important things about looking at linkage fees here is cycles. I guess everybody knows here that we go through economic cycles, and that will affect this subject as well. I have been involved in a number of developments here. I consider myself an affordable housing advocate and have served on city task forces with respect to how we accomplish that. We're not doing the best job, we're making progress. So that's all I have to tell you about me so far. Still involved in developments here.
Andy.
Andy Allison Management. I started doing development in Boulder probably about 98, 99, mainly commercial and apartment projects. And then in 2007, I had a bunch of land holdings. Couldn't figure anything to do with those and got into low-income housing tax credit deals. And since then, I've done roughly about 450 LIHTC units, all here in Boulder. Have some deals in Denver. And our last deal I did with a couple partners was the largest cash in lieu allotment from the city of about $10 million. So I'm pretty interested in this linkage fee, on how it works, where the money goes, and what the projects are that are identified for it, and look forward to the conversation.
Great, Andy. Leslie.
Hi, my name is Leslie Durgin, and I've been in Boulder, like Lou, since the early 70s, and have been largely working either in public policy in the state government or in local nonprofits. And in 1989, ran for, as Susan and I were just talking about, ran for and was elected to Boulder City Council and then served as mayor until 1997. And I can tell you there is a real appreciation for having done it and not being there anymore. I tried to retire 3 times, and most recently the head of Boulder Housing Partners, which is Boulder's affordable housing, Boulder's housing authority, called and said, I want to put my money, Leslie, where your mouth is. And so I am now a consultant both with the Housing Authority and with the Chamber, which in Boulder we don't call the Chamber of Commerce, but used to be, working on affordable housing. And I have been working a lot on the linkage fee, which will be coming to City Council tonight. And shall I take a minute and talk about?
Yes.
So for those of you not familiar with the affordable housing linkage fee, Boulder is not unique, but is not common in charging commercial or non-residential development a fee for the costs of housing, affordable housing in our community. And the policy behind it is that growth should pay its own way. Tonight, the City Council will look at the affordable housing linkage fee, which is charged on commercial, retail, warehouse, a whole variety of different kinds of non-residential development. and will set the fee on a square footage basis. It's currently $9.53 a square foot for office, which is the most expensive fee. And then it goes down from there on the different kinds of building that I just enumerated. There is a proposal before council to go up to $35 a square foot. We think that's crazy. And so have formed a coalition with the Affordable Housing Network, with the Chamber, Downtown Business Inc., Boulder Housing Partners, and 18 other providers of affordable housing in Boulder to recommend to City Council that it be increased to $12 a square foot, which many people say is inadequate, and other people in the community say is exorbitant, and so we figured we probably hit the right number. It will be interesting. We have a battle tonight, but I can tell you as a former mayor, I know how to count to 5, and we've got the votes for 12.
The question was, what is a linkage fee? So maybe you could elaborate on that.
So, I'm sorry, the linkage fee is, as I just said, it's a fee charged on non-residential development, so commercial office spaces, et cetera, et cetera. And developers pay that. It goes into an affordable housing fund managed by the city and is allocated to actually 19 different housing providers, some of them very small. But the biggest ones are Thistle, which you've, I'm sure, heard about Thistle Communities, Boulder Housing Partners, Allison Management LLC, that are building and managing affordable housing in our community. And it's a subsidy to help people who are providing affordable housing to bridge the gap between some of the financing that Andy just mentioned and the cost of actually building affordable housing in Boulder.
So Leslie, could you elaborate on what in Boulder, in the city of Boulder, is considered affordable?
Well, it varies, and it's in part whether you're doing rental or doing homes for purchase. There aren't many of those, but we'd like to see a lot more of them. For Boulder Housing Partners, which is the housing authority, they're providing rental for people who are 30 to 60% of the area median income. And I would parenthetically say I was quite intrigued at one of the other presentations at the wonderful cost of housing and how it's going up and up. 23% of Boulder lives under the poverty guidelines. Not many people in our community know that. 63% of the people in Boulder are what is called housing challenged. That means they spend more than 30% of their monthly income on housing. So there is a real need in Boulder for affordable housing for people who are living and working in this community but are not getting paid adequate wages to purchase housing or in fact rent housing. And then there is a whole program which we hope to see expanded. Andy's one of the best people in this in terms of building housing that then can be available for purchase, because that really is one of the fundamental ways out of poverty.
So just to make sure I'm clear, currently the fee's $9.50 and it would go to $12.
A square foot.
Square foot, yes. So a modest increase, a couple dollars per square foot.
We think it's fairly modest. There are others who are concerned about, it's about a 26% increase. So some people are saying that's substantial compared to what it could have been $35, and we think it's a modest amount.
So Lou, what do you think of the concept overall and the level that Leslie's fairly confident will pass tonight at $12 a square foot?
Okay. I'm going to give you two sides of the story. For one, the business community, I think, is resigned to and is, in fact, not unhappy to support this program. Affordable housing is needed in a community to get some balance. I have felt that way as well. The biggest difficulty that I think we have with this philosophically is that over the years, the leadership in Boulder has not been able to convince the voting citizenry that they ought to participate. There was a proposal on the ballot, I don't know, 20 years ago, to increase property taxes And the citizens said, no way, let somebody else pay for it if you want to do that. No. I find that a little shameful. It's not because business can't afford to make a contribution. It's because we haven't been able to convince the citizens that they ought to be part of this program. So who is it that's formulating the policy? What do they know that the citizens don't know? And why don't we have the leadership to convince the citizens that they ought to be supporting and providing the funds to do this? The reason we're seeing a linkage fee on commercial development, and Boulder is one of the few, I think there may be 2 or 3 other communities that have taxes, linkage fees on commercial development. Denver's is $1.70. $1.70. We are at $9.53 going to $12.50, with some of our council members wanting that to go to $35. Well, I would tell you from the commercial developer's point of view, it is not the developer that pays this, and it's always formulated that this fee is paid by developers. It isn't. It's funded by the banks that loan us the money to put up commercial development. And those costs have to be included in our pro formas that prove to the banks that the property that you're putting up in Boulder can generate a reasonable amount of revenue, reasonable enough so that it covers the cost of servicing that debt. And the banks want 1.2 times that. So what I'm saying to you is that a developer doing commercial development is looking at, can I afford to do this? How much money am I putting in? I'm going to get a loan to do the rest of it. I put in 25%. Let's say it's a $10 million project. We have to find $2.5 million of equity to put in it. Ask the bank to loan us $7.5 million. And they ask us to do a market survey to prove that the market can support that rent that will provide enough coverage so that we have a 20% insurance policy on our debt service. A lot of people don't have the understanding of how this is put together. And every community needs a balance of residential and commercial. Commercial supports not only their retail needs, like supermarkets, commercial also supports the job providing, the job providers. Now, $9 a foot, where we are now, $9.50, it probably is going to cost the tenant about 60 to 75 cents a square foot in rent in order to cover that cost. The developer has to recover the costs over some period of time. When it goes to $12, it's only raising that by a quarter or 30 cents. Can we handle it? Yes, we can handle it. And we can handle it because we are in a good part of the economic cycle and we do have demand in Boulder. The biggest problem with linkage fees on commercial development is this: it's cyclical. So when we have a 2008 financial crash and everything freezes, there is no new construction, there is no fund source. Now I'm going to link back to what I said before, early on, and in the affordable housing task forces, we kept making this point that, yeah, you can charge fees because you can do it. To try to get a stable income stream like a property tax, you have to get the citizens to vote it in. Okay, that's too hard, so we don't do it. We just charge it because we can. We can do fees. And you can see what happens here. The biggest danger to this is that it is the camel's nose under the tent. $12, $12.50, they can probably handle, and the tenants, particularly tenants like Google, Microsoft, IBM, they can handle this. But what about the small retailers? What about the startup businesses and the crawler businesses that don't have very large slopes, upward slopes in their revenues and can't afford the rents? So ultimately, you've got that danger that this cost creep that we get, and by the way, we have big cost creep in terms of construction costs today and the cost of land because it's limited. And now you have fees on top of that. At some point, we're going to become uncompetitive. The biggest fear is that when that happens, there is no stable revenue source that generates affordable housing fees. Leadership has to deal with that problem. And by the way, one of the things that Denver did when it implemented its $1.70 is it also balanced it with a stable revenue source by increasing property taxes. So there is an example of, I want to get it done too. I would like it to be stable. Business can pay a fair share, a reasonable share, where it doesn't force other companies out of business. But let's look at it realistically and find a way to support this in a manner where the revenue source for affordable housing is stable.
Thank you, Lou. Andy, can you give us your perspective on linkage fees in general and whether they're a reasonable means of raising revenue for affordable housing?
Yeah, I agree with Lou on quite a few of the points. I also believe that it should be community-wide and it should be, if this is really the will of the leadership and the will of the community, that it would have been better off going back to community. We're seeing a lot of pressure also on what Lou was hinting to, the smaller startup and retail operations. So we're going to have some pressure there from this rent increase. I thought Lou's point about this money going someplace, which I think the council gets a little confused on, that it's just something that digs into developers, not understanding it's going to be passed along is going to be pressure on the commercial development and the tenants. I tend to, more than likely will benefit from this linkage fee in my business, so I have both sides of this equation looking forward. So I think that affordable housing is important to the community, but I'm not 100% sure where the number should be. I wanted to just quickly mention something too, since Leslie brought up I know it was in the last election so much the development was pay their own way. Another item to look at this, I think, is they also are also proposing permit and fee increases as well. I don't know where that goes from the council. But recently, in Boulder, for affordable apartments, we average about $25,000 a door to the city of Boulder for permits and fees, including water and sewer and everything else. In Denver, that'd be about $5,800. So I find that, I know this isn't Leslie's comment, this is City Council's comment, and was an initiative last year. I find the thought of development not paying its own way in Boulder kind of ridiculous at those fee amounts. And tacking on more in the linkage fee, I think I can see both sides of this argument.
And just for the record, I strongly agree with both Lou and Andy. I am very concerned about charging non-residential development only for affordable housing. I think it's a much, much broader public policy issue and a huge community need. And when a community, as Boulder has done for years, says we aren't going to expand because we've ringed ourselves with purchased open space, and we're not going to go up because we have a height limit, you can't go out, you can't go up, and the neighborhood's saying, and we don't want any more development in our neighborhood. We have a huge problem in this community. And Lou, I strongly agree with you. If we could get this community to say, we will tax ourselves for people who are living here and providing services here but can't afford to live here, we would be a healthier community. And we're losing our middle class in Boulder. It's not a healthy situation for this community.
So if my math is correct, which is always a question, an additional $2.50 per square foot, using Google as an example at 300,000 square feet, that would be another $750,000 in fees for a project like Google. Both, a number of you have mentioned that it's really not the developer that pays it, it's the underlying businesses, the tenants of a building or the occupants of a building through higher rents. And I'm just wondering at what point do some of the smaller startup businesses suffer from that? How does it have an effect, a negative effect on the economy for those startups, we do a lot of CEO roundtables throughout the year with different industries. And invariably, no matter what sector it is, technology or outdoor industry or natural organic or whatever it might be, there are concerns about the cost of space, office space in the city of Boulder. So I'm just wondering, what's the overall impact of this on some of those smaller startup companies? Lou, do you want to kick that off?
Yeah, it's all speculative. Today, in today's market, with the costs of financing low, and there is, by the way, most of you probably are familiar with this, that there is a rush of cash that has come into the United States. We have low interest rates. Europe's got 0 to negative interest rates. Cash can't find a home to earn anything on it in the rest of the world. Same is true in Asia. So over the last 4 to 5 years, a lot of cash has come into this country looking for a place to invest it where they can have a return. Our own pension plans in the United States were invested in government bonds where they could earn 5 to 7%. Well, they can only earn 2 now. A lot of that cash has gone into real estate because real estate, even with escalating prices, is still returning 4, 5, and 6% on cash. So the small business can probably, in a market like this, find a way to get into the market, pay the existing rents, but they will have small margins. When interest rates rise and economic activity begins to taper off or decline, these businesses won't have a revenue stream to support the escalating rents. There is the problem. Is that immediate? It's a speculation. I don't think so. Today we have a strong market. We can put up projects and we can probably get the tenants to support themselves even with paying today's market rents. Market rents fluctuate with economic cycles. They go down as well as up. And that's the reason that the bankers, when they loan us the money to build the building, want us to show that the current market rents can generate not just the amount we have to pay them every month, $20,000 a month. No. It's got to generate $22,000 a month so they have a little insurance, so that we don't end up saying to them, here, take the keys. So you can see that there's risk in this. And there are a lot of folks, including people who run for office, who either ignore the fundamental economics or they've never been educated into them. But we are still an economic society. We're based on free markets. And competition is what generates the goodness, generates the jobs generate the incomes generate the sales generate the sales taxes. Colorado is a sales tax state. It doesn't support itself on property taxes. Local governments have to earn it through sales taxes. If the sales taxes disappear, well, we have to cut the fire department and the police department. These economic facts are very important for our politicians to grasp, and grasp in an understanding enough way to know that they have to balance things within the community, or we end up failing. Will it fail our own community? And that was exemplified back in the early 2000s when our Crossroads Mall went dark. And what happened during that period is that our sales went to surrounding communities. So Clint Folsom had a great deal. Where is he? Is he still there? Okay. So yeah, the sales taxes went to Broomfield and to Erie and other places where the retailers were. We didn't have retail. And Boulder started as the retail center of Boulder County. Finally, a number of the politicians understood, hey, wait a second, we're not going to be able to afford our lifestyle anymore if we don't find a way to get our retail sales back up again. This interrelated, intertwined set of circumstances. Employers need employees. Employers pay employees. Employees shop, generate sales taxes. That supports the government in a community. You've got to grasp that in order to do good public policy. And one of the issues we're talking about here with the linkage fees is that we have now, I wrote a paper 15 years ago, 2001. It came off the sales tax when Boulder wanted to reduce jobs in order to get the jobs population in balance. It didn't make any sense then. I wrote that paper, and facts about of what were going on then are the same as they are now. There has been no change in policy in that period. Yeah, we've been successful. Boulder has been more successful than others, and I give them credit for that. But a lot of that is accidental. It's the geographic advantages that we have here, but it is not fundamentally sound financial policy that will support this community over time. There are big risks in it, and if we don't take stronger actions, these risks will eventually end up hurting us badly. And so I'm glad to hear that you agree with trying to get the citizens involved in this, and they've got to grasp it. The only way you'll do it is with effective leadership.
So, I just have a follow-up to that. If the linkage fee comes in tonight at the $12 level, and new construction is paying that fee, rental rates would be higher for those tenants of those new facilities. Would that then drive up rates in existing facilities? Like the fact, because the average rental rate would be higher. Will it create an overall inflation in the cost of office space, for example?
Yes. Now, keep in mind though, this fee only is attached to new construction. This fee does not apply to facilities that are already existing and where the rents have been set for 5 years or 7 or 10 years. So what happens then is when we get into that part of the cycle where we have peaked and start coming down, what happens to new construction? Shuts off, like in 2008. It shuts off. If it shuts off, there is no revenue stream coming for affordable housing. No stable revenue stream. And that is the point, is that we got to wrestle with the issue of finding a stabilized revenue stream.
I'd like to ask a question to all of you as realtors, because educating people who are moving to Boulder about Boulder, I think largely falls to some of you. You're the ones who are presenting the community. You're talking about what the community is like. And in talking to people throughout Boulder, people are shocked to understand the rate of poverty. We have over 600 kids in the Boulder Valley School District that are homeless, and people don't understand that that is part of our community. So when we get to the discussion stage, I'd like to hear from you about what you hear about people who are moving to Boulder and have a perception of what this community is, but more significantly, whether you would be willing to play a role if we gave you the information to educate people about what Boulder really is and the opportunities for people to get engaged meaningfully into making this a healthier community. Question I'm posing to you when we get to that part of the discussion.
So Leslie and Andy, I'd like to back up a little bit. And I'm wondering if each of you could kind of describe for us the need. What is the need for affordable housing? What is the current situation in the city of Boulder? The city council would not be considering this if there wasn't a need. I think everyone in this audience well understands the need, but could you kind of describe it for us? Give us the big picture of the need for affordable housing.
I'll go first because mine's probably a little shorter than Leslie. I think has more stats and information. I'm not sure I know 100% where the numbers that are out there. I can tell you that in our current properties, we've been 100% leased since completion, and we have waiting lists for all the 60% AMI and 50% AMI rents. So the need seems to be substantial, and nothing tells us that there's not an incredible need for it.
Yeah, I can tell you some data that would support that, but the average monthly rent in Boulder for a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment is $2,000. little bit more, let's say $2,000. That makes it really unaffordable for people who are working in coffee shops, working in retail. We have a number of nonprofits that are finding that they cannot stay open on days when they need to provide services because their employees are living so far away that they are commuting long distances and sometimes can't get to work. 60,000 people a day drive into Boulder to work. We have small businesses that aren't open on Sundays anymore because their employees have to travel so far. Renters as a portion of the population, 52%. Some of this is skewed by the university. I mean, let's understand that definitely gives us a different demographic than exists in some of our neighboring communities. I mentioned earlier, almost 23% of our population is under the federal poverty guideline. Increase in average monthly rent from 2010 to 2015, gone up 61%. So it was bad then, it's a lot worse now. So we really have people who are spending well over, 63% are spending over 30% of their incomes just on housing. So housing security is a key issue in our community. And unless you're in the business that we're in, it's largely hidden. But it is a very real factor for many of our employees and maybe some of your employees as well. But as you go around and go to restaurants and go to coffee shops and things, think about how much money those people are earning and how much they're probably paying just to try to live.
Is Cliff Harold still in the audience? That's good, because Cliff should not hear this next question. And Lou, you might want to close your ears too. But looking at the lack of affordable housing in the city of Boulder, and continued growth in the business community, with Google being kind of the biggest example. Should some business expansions be actively pushed or encouraged to look at neighboring communities?
I work with Cliff, and I asked him that question, and the answer is yes. And Cliff Harold with the Boulder Economic Council is very, very responsible and responsive to people, companies who are looking at Boulder, and often guides them to neighboring communities to say, we can't meet your needs in this community, let's talk about other places. And for those of you that were in this room at the previous presentation, I was stunned at the amount of commercial development opportunity that is going to be available or is currently available in Broomfield, in Erie, in Louisville, Lafayette. It's
Tens of millions of square feet.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that, Lou? Or did you cover your ears? I didn't see.
No. Well, one of the things that is clear is that it's clear to people who deal on the business side of the economy. Not maybe so clear to people who have retired from, let's say, the government labs or the university. You cannot draw a circle around a community and call it a self-sustaining community. It's not an economic pod on its own, for the reasons that were just addressed. There are going to be, if you draw an artificial circle around a community and say that this is Boulder and the rest of you are not Boulder, 60,000 cars would go away, right? And there would be some people in this town who'd be happy about the 60,000 cars that went away because they're not allowed in. But I can tell you, after 16 years on the board of Boulder Community Hospital, and ultimately chairing the foundation board and the operating board, that we had 2,400 people and fewer than a third of them lived in the city of Boulder, including the physicians. How would you like to be on that gurney waiting for your doctor or your attendant to come in and treat you that day? Because they had to drive in from Longmont. And there was some road work by CDOT on the Diagonal Highway. I told that to Matt Applebaum one time, and he gave me the condescending look and smile. But the truth is, when you work in an organization like that and you see the noble work it does for the community and supporting the citizenry, you can get a little resentful about these attitudes. That's an organization that is absolutely required as a fundamental service to any community, medical service. So you see what I'm saying, that an artificial ring that defines a city is artificial. We are not a self-sustaining economic pod, and we need to recognize it, and we need to deal with it in terms of the way we transport people and our attitudes towards those who are coming in from other communities because they can't afford to live there but can't afford to live here.
And you said build a wall, so. So I'm wondering if maybe Leslie, we can start with you. Maybe describe the negatives, and we touched on it a little bit, but what are some of the negatives of the affordable housing deficit? What does it do to a community like Boulder if blue-collar workers, many blue-collar workers cannot afford to live in the city, and many white-collar workers cannot afford to live in the city? What is the effect of that?
Well, in Boulder, boy, as far back as in the 90s, I was saying we are becoming what I call the barbell community. We have low-income people, we have people with some significant resources and wealth, but we're losing our middle class. That has only grown worse over time. Because as a community, as inadequate as it is, we have provided, as we've talked about already, some funds and increased opportunities, although insufficient, for low-income people. And then, of course, you all know if you're in residential development and residential real estate, there are people with significant wealth that are living here and are moving here. Boulder is losing its middle income, and that is not a healthy community. When you lose, as you were calling them, white-collar workers, and that's true, but a lot of middle income or moderate income workforce housing is so desperately needed in this community that many of the employees who are earning adequate salaries, but because housing is so expensive, are unable to live in this community. And what it does, among many other things, is it forces employees to say, can't do overtime, I need to get home to my family, or I'm doing overtime and I can't get home to my family. They don't invest and engage in the community, and really creates a very different kind of mentality and a very different kind of community vitality when people cannot live in the same community in which they spend the majority of their time, or their families are struggling to get the kids to school and they're one sick day away from a disaster. And we've got people living on the road trying to get from one community to another. So it really skews, I think, the sense of engagement and involvement, and it isn't healthy.
Not to mention the transportation issues too, right?
Kind of environmental issues.
Andy, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I look at it from what we hear from the tenants of it being life-changing to have either an affordable apartment or affordable house in the community they live in, close to their work. I think it's a stress reliever. They mentioned that to us over and over again about their life being easier, being able to get to work easier, closer to everything, which is back to the transportation. And I think just taking that burden of, if you consider the stats that Leslie was talking about, having to spend that much of your income towards rent, you can imagine the pressure that it puts on people.
I have other questions, but I'd like to open it up to the audience now, if anyone has questions for our panel. Yes, ma'am.
So I agree with you all, and I'm glad to be here, but I noticed that a lot of people left early, which may just be that it's the end of the day, but my experience has been that maybe people broadly in Boulder aren't feeling the pinch and aren't recognizing this issue as critically as you all have described it. So I'm curious how we change mindsets about the importance of having more affordability and affordable housing.
I think one key issue is to put a real face on the situation and to really let people in Boulder, who I basically believe are well-intentioned, well-meaning, good, optimistic people. And certainly in my experience, I've found it throughout the community. But you throw a whole bunch of data at people and they kind of glaze over and they say, gee, I don't understand it, and it isn't part of my experience anyway. So we are talking about doing a real community education program, and I don't know yet what that means, but putting a face on it. So people can say, huh, that's my neighbor, or gee, that's the kid who's pouring coffee for me every morning, or however we do it, or my kids' school teachers, or the firefighters. I mean, to Lou's point about people who are coming in to provide emergency services and can't get here. I think that will be a key, is to make it real and make it personal, not just data in the clouds.
Yes, sir.
Leslie, to be fair, I think the city council asked staff to look at 3 levels, 10, 20, and 35. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, the city council set 3 levels for the linkage fee. 10, 20, 35. The consultant that did the research said they could legally go up to 100 a square foot. Staff will recommend $15 tonight.
Great, thank you. My following question is, to answer, Lou, some of your concerns about up and down markets, what about $12, $15, and a COLA, cost of living? Because as we go 3 or 4 years down the road, the linkage fee is for asphalt, hiring firefighters, more books in the library. At least that's how it was presented to me when I heard the staff briefing. Why not just say, okay, great, let's put $12 plus a COLA on it, and that way it sort of, as good times go up, the library gets more books, and if it stabilizes, the library stabilizes. Any thoughts on a COLA?
Yeah, let me clarify. The linkage fee is just for affordable housing, so it doesn't go to libraries and human services and police and fire. There is a different part of the development excise tax. You're exactly right, which is going to be discussed tonight as well. That's the capital infrastructure part. And it does have an escalator for the cost of living. So they can say, for example, $12 a square foot, but it will vary depending on the cost of living.
So Leslie, just to clarify, this fee would have to be used only for affordable housing. And is there an expectation of how much affordable housing that might create?
Our analysis is that huge if, as Lou has very accurately pointed out, over the next 10 years, there is, based on the past experience of the past couple of years, an additional $1 million of commercial space built, a big if. It will
A million square feet, correct? A million square feet.
I'm sorry, yeah, 1 million square feet. It will generate almost $13 million in additional money for the housing linkage fee. And at the cost of $116,000, which is what the city uses per unit, it will build an additional 109. But this is only for the office portion of the linkage fee. So there are different fees that I haven't analyzed that will look at retail and hospital and warehouse, that kind of thing.
Can I follow up on that one?
Yes.
That was just one of my ones I wanted to talk about. We hear a lot about how this fee can generate units, and I think it's important to understand that I truly believe, as one of the beneficiaries of the casting lieu, that the city has a fiduciary responsibility to really vet these projects that come in asking for these fees. Right now, we're in such an extreme real estate market that we're hearing the terms land banking and purchasing properties with long-term leases, buying existing apartment buildings at $300,000 a door. These are all not good uses of those funds, I don't believe at all. So we can say these are going to create a lot of units, but only if it's put out to good use with good vetting.
Sir, you had a question first, I think.
I did. What is the correct amount of affordable housing for the city of Boulder?
What is the correct amount of affordable housing for the city of Boulder?
City's adopted a goal of 10% affordable housing to low-income families. And we're currently at about 8%, and I think they're talking about building another 2,000 units for low income. The city adopted a moderate income housing plan recently that would have 3,500 units devoted to moderate income, middle income workforce.
What do you think is the right amount?
I don't know the answer. I don't know. What? Lou might. Andy might.
Don't, but I can tell you it's higher than 10%. When you look at the people who need to be accommodated here and are not, as is evidenced by 60,000 of them coming in a day, you can tell that even if we go from 8 to 10% of our population covered by affordable housing, it's not going to be enough.
Are there any state initiatives for affordable housing? It seems like this is kind of a small scale. If we made it bigger, it would work better.
Are there state initiatives?
Construction
State
defect.
funded. Yeah.
Supply.
I am not aware of state initiatives to accommodate affordable housing that Boulder has an advantage to. I'm not aware of any. That doesn't mean they aren't there, I'm just not aware of
Yeah,
any.
it's mostly funding sources rather than any kind of particular policy or action.
Now, you aware, let me finish this one. Are you aware of what funded affordable housing before this discussion got started on linkage fees for commercial development? No. So we need to start with the base. How is affordable housing currently being financed? Here's how. Anyone wanting to build a residential subdivision, let's say an apartment house with 100 units in it, before they can get a building permit, they have to agree to give 20% of those units to the city for affordable housing. And they have an alternative. They can either build them on site out of their costs, or they can pay the city what's called cash in lieu. Because let's say that the neighborhood or the building that they're building does not accommodate affordable housing so well. And by the way, that when I say that, I'm talking about things like once you have government control of an asset, you can't mix that into a site of commercial development because the lenders see that as a conflict of ownership. So the city recognized that when they formulated the plan, and what has funded affordable housing so far has been primarily those units that got built on site because they could be, and cash in lieu that came from developments where they could not put them on site, and so the developer borrowed the money to pay the city of Boulder an equivalent amount, let's say $100,000 a unit for 20 units, or $2 million. And that $2 million went into the Affordable Housing Fund, and then outfits like Boulder Housing Partners and Thistle Community Housing used those funds as equity to either build or buy another housing development and fix the rents.
A question right here.
Is it time to take the city of Boulder's cash in lieu and buy land and build units in our neighborhood communities?
They've always had that opportunity to do it. They have the opportunity to do it. And I think what restricts it is the level of opportunity for buildings that are available. So you're asking a question about land banking? Yeah,
No,
they could.
Really more regional thinking about this problem. You can't solve it within Boulder's footprint.
We define Boulder.
Yeah.
Question right here.
So mine's kind of a two-part thing. It's like, Boulder's done a really good job of limiting supply, which is the main reason why it's gotten so expensive, as well as the restrictions and everything else. Correct? And I guess the kind of related is Lou, do you think there's any chance of the construction defect law, if that were to be some resolution there statewide, would it be possible to put some new units that are market rate, that are higher density, that would put for condominiums, for instance? Would that be something that might be feasible at some point in the future?
There are two elements to your question. Does the construction defects law inhibit production of housing? It does. There's no question about it. We don't take on projects for sale for that reason. So condominiums are not built, and condominiums are less expensive. You can get higher densities. You're putting a lot more units on the same piece of ground, so the ground cost per unit is lower. So that's an inhibitor. The other element of your question is related to, let's say you don't do for sale housing, you do for rent housing. Well, for rent housing is going to be dependent upon how much land is available for it. And right now we're restricted within the city of Boulder. And the housing providers, the affordable housing providers like BHP and Thistle, have to buy projects that are within the city of Boulder in order to support the citizens of the city of Boulder. Now, one of the things that should be examined is, how do you extract that to recognize the fact that people who work here are, I should say it the other way, the citizens who live here are entirely dependent upon the workforce that works here. If they don't have that workforce, you don't get your coffee at Starbucks, right? Or you aren't able to go to Macy's and find somebody who will help you find the shirt you like. So the point is that we're inextricably linked to having a workforce, and today we cannot provide the housing for the workforce. What do you think would happen if we provided another 10,000 housing units? What would the 60,000 go to? And see where I'm going.
Yeah.
You got 60,000 coming in today, and in 5 years, is that going to be 65 or 75? And if you put even 10,000 more units, then that's impossible in this town. Are you going to solve that problem? There's got to be some more imaginative ways to look at this problem and open up your mind to other ways to at least put pressure on the problem so that it diminishes.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Not a lot of my questions were questions. You know, I grew up on the East Coast a long time. Everybody drove. They moved outside of the city, they drove into the city for a multitude of reasons. So I don't think that driving or not driving is as much of the issue. Because within the city of Boulder, as everybody's gone over, we simply don't have enough land. And this city is not going to allow us to have enough land. And if they did exactly what you're talking about would happen. So when you put out there, we actually come up with a more imaginative ideas. I'm like, well, why aren't we? And one thought that I had was that it's amazed me that the sustainability tax that was one half of the former open space tax simply wasn't a proponent with affordable housing. Because I wonder how many people who checked the box for the second open space tax really understood that they were converting an existing tax from open space purchasing to another city initiative. So why not do that? So that to me is more creative, but it doesn't change the issue because we don't have enough land. So rent control becomes an issue. Because if we do not produce and limit the possibility and cap the rents, there isn't any way because there's too much demand for a house. That's my, I don't know what you guys think about that.
So the tax you're referring to is a county tax, not a city tax, that was just passed.
And they didn't have
It was a county tax. And in the state of Colorado, rent control is unconstitutional. Yeah, so are real estate transfer taxes, thanks to Tabor. So two possible sources or solutions that are more common on the East Coast, for example, in some parts of the West Coast, are not available to those of us in Colorado.
Probably time for one more question. Yes, ma'am.
So let's say there is more money coming in through linkage fees. How does that solve the problem if there's still nowhere to build the housing? And I am a big fan of the Boulder Affordable Housing Program, and I've sold several condos in the program. So I'm constantly educating people about it. But there's just not enough of it. The last listing I had 13 qualified buyers all in a row for me to go through if the first one didn't qualify. So I think there's a lot of things that have to happen in order for the housing to be supplied that there's no. I'm open to ideas.
Take a little of that one. Yeah, I think, one issue that we also run into is, so the only way we're gonna even make a dent in that need is by being able to build a little bit denser developments because there's not enough land in there to break into that. But I just read an article yesterday in the New York Times, which reminded me of all the communities that we emulate, which is Palo Alto, who has the same problem, and Mountain View, and without some sort of community-wide agreement that density is going to be can be used for this, we're not gonna solve the issue. And if you've been here as long as these guys have, and we know or I know as a developer, every time that there's an opportunity to do something that's more dense, we get killed in the neighborhoods. And that's very similar to the issues they have in California, which is they have a much larger problem than we have. So to answer your question, I don't know how you make it down with the situation we have here.
Well, that concludes our, Lou, go ahead.
I will add one more point. It's a positive point, but I'm going to illustrate what Andy was saying on the negative side to begin with. The Twin Lakes project, right? When you saw the neighborhoods come out and with tomahawks and pitchforks against it. Now, there may be some residents of that area who just don't want that, who are in this audience today, just don't want that development near them. Tolerance and compromise is the only solution, and the way to get that is by outreach and education. And that's where we started with this. Somebody has got to reach out. We've got to find a way to get this kind of conversation going with the citizens so that they buy in, they go hard, and they say, yeah, I liked my neighborhood the way it was, but this is a bigger problem and I have to make a contribution.
All right, that concludes our session, right, Lou? I think. Thank you to Lou and Andy and Leslie for a great conversation.